This brings us to an exercise that I like to go through to get into the right mindset. I realize this may look daunting to you, but don't fear. This is a highly doable step-by-step process I created that will enable you to go back and refine exactly how to have the right mindset and achieve success. So what I want to do here is get into mindset and the 6 steps that this diagram shows you. Step 1 is knowing what you want. Step 2 is believing in your success. Step 3 is becoming passionate. Step 4 is becoming present. Step 5 is being positive. And step 6 is being persistent. Through this process is how you will achieve success and achieve the right mindset. So as I said, step 1 in this process, what we do is we go from the top down and from left to right. So the first one was knowing what you want. Now what I want you to do is inside your project book, I want you to write down what you truly enjoy doing. What you truly enjoy doing. That could be anything. Just write it all out. Just write it all down right now. Take a minute or 2 to do that. Now pick the item out of that whole entire list you just created that you are most passionate about. Write down how you would use that passionate item to change yourself, your life, and the world. So quite simply on the sheet, you can write myself, my life, and the world, and write how each one will change. The next step is write a description of your perfect day, incorporating that passion into it. So what would you do? What would you be creating? Where would you live? Who would you be living with, if anybody? What kind of cars would you drive? Where would you be living? What would you smell? What would you hear? What would you feel? Think about every detail and write down that perfect day, but I want you to incorporate how that passionate item fits in to your perfect day. Just think about your most perfect day and how you would use that passionate item. Next, I want you to write down specific goals that are a part of your vision, your perfect day. I want you to actually go through your perfect day now, and I want you to find things that you need to actually accomplish to make that happen. So for example, if it's buy a new house, you have to write down buy a new house worth $1.1 million or whatever your goal is. Could be $500,000, could be $300,000, could be $50,000. Whatever you want it to be, write down those important goals. Now that you have those goals, write down the specific action steps you need to take to accomplish those goals. So what you can do is you can take those goals, copy them on a new sheet of paper, and just put one at a time, and then write down the actual specific action steps you need to take to get there. Now I want you to be as specific as possible. I want you to write down things like, I need to go and call this person. I need to contact that person. I need to send an email to this person. Just write down specific action steps you need to take to accomplish these goals. Now, this is a really cool part. Rank your action steps, now that you have your whole entire action steps, right? From most important to least important. I want you to think about, what is the most important to me? What is the least important to me, right? And I want you to just go down the line and mark them from 1 through whatever, however many action steps you have, from most important to least important. Now, as you do this, the next step, as you start doing this, you will start believing in your success. As you can see on the flow chart, this allows you to start believing in your success. Now, as we move to the top of the chart, believing in your success, I want you to read your perfect day. I want you to read everything, and I want you to read it out loud. I want you to read your goals. I want you to read your action steps, and I want you to read every single one of them out loud and say it to yourself. This is what I have to do. This is what I have to accomplish. This is what I have to feel. You see, there's certain subliminal triggers and brain consciousness that happens. Brain dendrites start sending neural activity to each other. Your brain starts firing in a different way when you read out loud, when you write things down, when you do things physically with your senses, such as writing, seeing, speaking, hearing, touching, feeling. All of that stuff is so important. It's so important because you're anchoring it into your subconscious. So read every single one of them out loud. After you read every single one out loud, I want you to ask yourself a question. Do I feel this is achievable. And ask yourself honestly, yes or no? Does this feel achievable to me? And if it isn't, guess what? You actually have to go back to the first step, which is knowing what you want. If you do feel it's achievable, you can go to the next step, which is becoming passionate. Now, like I said, if you do not feel this is achievable, you need to go back to the first step and redo the whole entire exercise of knowing what you want, because you must feel that this is achievable. So until you actually get the results that you want by knowing it's achievable, that's when you're in the right mindset. So continue on. Step 3 is becoming passionate. Now what I want you to do is start a journal in your project book. I want you to write down your perfect day, your goals, and your action steps. This is going to become your mission statement. This is going to become your message, your platform, you. This is going to become you. So take the most important action steps and start implementing them. And take your least important action steps and start implementing them. And what you'll see is that you're going from top to bottom, and you're going from bottom to top, and you're going to meet in the middle. Now, the reason why I start saying this is because most people say, do the most important things first, or do the least important things first. Everyone has a different opinion. I suggest you do both at the same time. Because when you can meet in the middle and you see the heavy lifting being done and you see some of the easier stuff being done and you're working towards the middle, that's when you feel balance. That's when you feel internal peace. So then you have to ask yourself, as you start implementing this stuff, did you implement? Did you actually implement what you wanted to go out and accomplish? And so if you did, you can go to the next step. But if you didn't, what you need to do is ask yourself a question. Do you believe this is achievable? Do you believe that this is possible? And if the question is still yes, I want you to take the 2 action steps that you find most difficult, or just 2 action steps, one from top, one from the bottom, and just implement it. Just go out and implement it. Now, if you answered no to the question, and do you believe that this is achievable, I want you to, in your journal, write down the most important and least important steps to actually reach that goal, right? Write down the reasons why you didn't actually complete your action steps. I want you to write down the reasons what stopped you from actually accomplishing it. Now write down the steps to accomplish those action steps. So it's almost like creating sub-steps for those pieces, right? There's always a process to getting things done. Sometimes it may just take a little bit longer, and that's okay. Once you get through this process, and you can say, I implemented these action steps, and you can say yes, what I want you to do is write down the most important and least important action steps and what actions they took to implement. I actually want you to write down what it took to actually accomplish those action steps. As you start going through your journal and as you start completing your action steps, I actually want you to cross out every single one and cross it out, because that feeling is fulfillment, and we all need that as human beings. I want you to read what you have accomplished with your action steps. I want you to read every single one of them out loud. I want you to read what you still have to do as well. You still have those steps to achieve those goals. You still have those steps to achieve what you want. Say everything out loud, and I want you to say out loud what you're grateful for, and I want you to feel good about everything that you're doing. And that will bring you to the next step, which is living every day, being present. Do you feel clarity at this point? Or is your brain chatter-free? Do you still feel like you're fighting yourself? Well, if that's the case, it's time to take a break. It's time to just let off a little bit, take a day or 2 break, and just relax. It's no big deal. If your brain is noise-free, I still want you to go and meditate just for 15 minutes. And that can be done through anything. You can drink water, you can exercise, you can eat healthy food, you can go for a walk. You can do anything where you feel you're just going to go take a break. Whether you accomplished and your brain is empty, whether you didn't accomplish and you feel like you need to take a break, this is what you need to do during that break. All it takes is about 15 minutes. That's it. Just 15 minutes to reset, and I want you to think about it as you're doing this, why you're doing this. And I want you to be present in every single moment of why you're doing this. The next question to ask yourself is, are you achieving results? And if you're not achieving results, then what you need to do is you need to go back to being persistent. You need to go back to writing down all those action steps and figure out why you're not actually figuring out these action steps. Now, if you are achieving your goals, review the first pages of your journal again. Read the story out loud. Read your goals out loud. And start looking at the action steps that you actually accomplished and the ones you still have to do. Then you ask yourself, did you achieve every single goal in your journal? And if the answer is no, then I need you to go back to being passionate. And I need you to go back to really understanding and becoming passionate. If you did achieve every single goal in your journal, well, guess what? Now you can go on to being positive. Being positive is actually very simple. Do you enjoy what you're doing? Do you really love what you're doing right now? All the steps that you've taken thus far, do you like doing it? Well, if the answer is no, I need you to reread your action steps inside of your book. I really need you to reread your action steps and go back to your goal and figure out whether it actually makes sense to you and whether it feels fulfillment inside. If you really do enjoy what you are doing, I want you to ask yourself a question. Do you enjoy the results that you're getting? Well, if the answer to that is no, guess what? You need to go all the way back to the beginning to knowing what you want. And if you do enjoy the outcome that's happening, well, guess what? You can move on to the next level, which is achieving success. The next step is being persistent. What you want to do in being persistent is review your action steps from your journal. Identify which action steps don't let you progress. Write that item down, create sub-action steps to overcome that bottleneck, and implement those action steps. Once this is done, you have to ask yourself the question, have you completed the action steps? If the answer is no, then you need to go back to the beginning of this step. If the answer is yes, guess what? You're living it every day and you're being present, so you can go back to that step now. And so as you can see, when you go through this whole entire process, the answer allows you to achieve success, and that is the end of the pattern. You are killing these patterns, you're killing these negative things inside of you, and you are achieving success. I use this in every day of my life. I use this to make myself happy. I use this to accomplish things. This is the true power, utilizing your senses to achieve everything you've ever imagined. And this is just the beginning to just creating the right mindset.